No intro today?
Oh, we did. That was quick.
Yeah.
Hey, peace. So we did the intro and all that. All right. Yeah. Appreciate everybody being here. I'm just jumping into the start of this show. But I want to thank everybody for tuning in to We Charge Colonialism podcast and book club. Today, is another episode. I think we're on episode 18 right now. So, I appreciate everybody who tunes in every week and have this discussion with us. I actually was I'm kind of frazzled right now because I was going to do this from my computer and I couldn't get the video to work. So I was trying to restart my computer. That's why I came on the way that I did. So, but I'm recording from my phone right now. But yeah. So welcome to We Charge Colonialism. Like every week, we discuss some of the current events that are happening around the world, and we do a book analysis and examine some of our great leaders, our writers from an African perspective as we analyze society and our relationship to the colonial powers, whether it's through the news or through these books. We're searching for answers to the colonial power. And so, and I'm Ikemba, member of the Public Relations Committee.
Peace, everyone. This is Tierney Sherry. I am the steering committee chair for colonialism.
Good morning, everyone. I am Frank, member of WCC.
All right, and we're your team. And so, like every week, we like to start off just with a weekly roundup of what's going on in the news. Like I said, so we can sort of examine how colonialism is affecting Africans all over the world. So, it's important that the colonial institution is all pervasive and it affects African people. And in order for us to really experience any type of liberation, any freedom or right to self-determination, we have to destroy the colonial institution. And so, like I said, we're going to start off with our weekly roundup. And Frank, you're going to, start us off with what's happening in the news?
Yeah, sure. Right now, how to call it, in Madagascar, the president, Andre Rajoelina, he was missed by assassination through some foreign influence and also local influence. So it was based, both internal factors and external factors that was trying to overthrow him or to assassinate him. And it was not just him, but it was also other government official. So it seems that there was actually going for him and at the same time going for a close cabinet member to him, because taking him down and leaving those cabinet member in is like still leaving his government in power. So, but that attempt was failed. And this is not the first time, so since he been in power 2009, he have been facing several, coup d'etat or assassination. But I think we usually say this. I think I would say that one thing that is making him to survive is because I don't know. I'm not living there, but I think he do have a great relationship with his people. And once you have a great relationship with your people, you'll always be protected. And bear in mind, this guy came to power in 2009 with the help or the backing of the military. So that's the point too. So he have the military and the military too have him. So in that attempt, of assassination, he will be protected as well. And this is a country that been going on coup d'etat since the 1960s, since it independent from France. And this country, before it was called the Union of France or the French Union, and then before it became Madagascar in the 60s. And since that time up to now, they've been fixing numerous coup d'etat or assassination attempt as well. And when France, when they get independent from France, they left the country very poor to the extent that 9 out of 10 Malagasy live on less than $2 a day. So that tells you how their former colonial master left the country, and up to now they are still behind the country because I think they want to take over. And what bothered me, so much is like a country that they call, I don't know what, Indian Ireland. I don't know why they call it Indian Ireland when it is in Africa, but that is another storyline. Yeah, so that is what happened in the news. So you see these numerous coup attempts, we are beginning to see foreign influence. So we saw in Haiti, they have foreign influence, missionary, and then now in Madagascar again, foreign influence and at the same time missionary. So we should look up.
Yeah, thanks for that. You said the population is what percentage of the population is living less than $2 on less than? But you're on mute.
Yeah, about 9 out of 10% in Madagascar live on less than $2 a day.
Yeah, because I was also doing some research into the economy. I always like to look at a country's economy, especially like these countries when we're talking about African people and African states that have experienced colonialism, and which we're talking about. I think 90%. Well, there was only 2 countries in Africa. I believe Liberia and Ethiopia, yeah, that were not colonized during the colonial period. And yeah, so looking at Madagascar and their economy now, we know that it was a French colony from 1897 to 1960. I was looking at the economy and I see that like 80% of the world's vanilla comes out of Madagascar, and the laborers though are the lowest paid of the workers that produce workers in vanilla producing countries. I think like this is an example too of neocolonialism, or capitalism itself. You know what I'm saying? Where Madagascar is producing 80% of the world's vanilla, but the workers are unable to benefit from the proceeds because of the value that is being placed on their labor. That's why they're producing as much vanilla, because vanilla isn't even indigenous to Madagascar, but that's why they're producing so much is because the companies are able to exploit the workers there. But just like looking into that and seeing that the Chinese have also, locked in on the trade of vanilla in Madagascar. So I'm just closely watching this assassination attempt. I'm not sure what was all behind it. There being French nationals attempting to assassinate, the president of Madagascar, 2021, which is interesting. But, once again, this is a former French colony, but what's the connection with France and Madagascar today? And I think it's a microcosm of how these colonial relationships are never severed, even during independence. There's still this relationship, this oppressive and exploitative relationship between the former colonizers and the colony. But Taryn, I know I said much.
No, I think you hit a lot of the points I was going to hit. So I think it's very interesting. It seems like French former colonies, I feel like the assassinations are almost like constant. I don't remember the last one last time, and anyone could correct me if I'm wrong, but it was an English speaking colony. That we know of with assassination. Obviously, there are ones that we don't know. So I think just inherently the French relationship in Africa obviously is very detrimental. On top of that, you hit on the issue that African countries have been transformed into plantation economies. So if you think about the way that we're set up, the reason why Africans can't feed themselves, or at least the masses of Africans, is not because it's not the capacity. There's the capacity in all these countries. There's agriculture. Like think about how much land, think about how much about the sun. Think about all these things that Africa has, but during colonialism, these economies were literally set up to export to Europe, and we've never disrupted that. We've never, said, okay, no more. We're not going to be focused on exporting to Europe. We're going to be focused on sharing among our people, and so that condition still exists today. And it's kind of hard to tell, like, who was it that planned this assassination, because I think African people, usually when we hear assassination, we want to think like it was the white man behind it. I mean, I hear some people, they're saying that with Haiti, it was the white man behind it. I think that we have to also keep in mind, whenever the conditions on the ground are so dire, like they were here, this is the natural result. So it's just very interesting, again, to see that once again, the colonial situation has just proven that it cannot be stable for our people, and that we're unfortunately in this perpetual power grab, because since the conditions are so dire, the governmental officials are automatically going to not look out for the interests of the people, but they're looking out for their own individual interests. So I think it's just another example of that.
And let me add something to that French. Let me ask something quick. For each time we discuss and research and dig into it, we find out about new things and bringing new things. Now, for those of you who love vanilla, you never knew like vanilla was from Africa, right? Because they say French vanilla, so all you think is for France. So now that in the recording, you know where vanilla comes from. Instead of them calling it the Madagascar vanilla, they called it the French vanilla. That is also, you see, exploitation as well. And then, 9 out of 10% live on $2 a day. Let that sink in, and then see how many billion or millions of dollars the French people are making out of vanilla in Madagascar, and they call it French vanilla.
Hey, yeah, that's a great point. I was looking into this. They're in 1841, because like I mentioned earlier, vanilla isn't indigenous to Madagascar. It was brought there in the 1800s from Mexico, and Mexico is the only place that has bees that pollinates the vanilla orchid. So in 1841, a 12-year-old enslaved African by the name of Edmund Albius invented a way to pollinate the vanilla orchid, which is just an example. I bring that up just to show, like, how the workers is who produce the value, but they're not reaping the benefits of their labor. And so when you go to Madagascar, once again, this place that's producing 80% of the vanilla that's consumed around the world, the natural vanilla, because 99% of the vanilla that we do consume is not even natural vanilla. That's another, story. But natural vanilla, 80% is being produced in Madagascar. But yeah, definitely appreciate you bringing this news, and let's stay in tune with what's happening on the ground in Madagascar. But we're going to move on to Tyranny, who has some similar news.
Yeah, this was probably the bigger news. So in Mali, there was another assassination attempt against the interim African president. Quick background story for those who don't know: Mali had a coup last year that basically upset France, and you can tell it upset France because the ECOWAS and the African Union were outraged. They basically barred Mali from participating inside of the African Union, and they closed the borders. Well, because of that, Mali, the military junta started complying, and they were basically set to have an election. I believe at beginning of next year, they were set to have an election. But the military junta, they didn't like the way that, I think it's kind of like France is trying to hurry up and rush the election to make sure that they could reestablish power. The military junta did not like that. And so once again, they had a coup. Now, since then, Mali has basically been on the reject list of Africa. They've been shut out of the African Union again. Once again, their borders are closed because, again, the African puppets around the continent, they know how to behave, together when it comes to upholding the colonial master's agenda. While this is happening, though, Mali has been reaching out to other people to help. Since France withdrew from Mali, now they're reaching out to Russia, for example. And so that creates another dynamic, obviously, because Russia and France are at odds for various reasons as well. Well, just last week, it might have been actually earlier this week, but I think it was last week, the president of Mali almost suffered an assassination attempt. He was celebrating at the mosque. It was the Muslim holiday, Eid Mubarak, and someone took out a knife and tried to assassinate him. Now, I think we all, because of the situation, this guy is very much, very much running contrary to the interest of what France wants. And I'm not saying at all that I don't believe this is a revolutionary. I don't believe this is someone who has proven that, he has a revolutionary program that's going to be good for the masses of the people. But what he has done, though, is that France has an agenda inside of the region, and he's completely disrupted that agenda. And historically, when that happens, whether it was Thomas Sankara or just so many different African presidents under Francophone rule, they sent in their reinforcements and tried to assassinate that person. So the obvious question is France behind this assassination attempt? I think it could be, or it could be, the confusion. I don't think we quite know, but we'll definitely be watching.
Man, this is interesting. Yeah, keep us updated with what's happening there, because just being here in America, there's a lot of dynamics that's happening, are just being put into these power plays, that's taking place in Africa. And it can cause a lot of confusion because the media, we already know the media is not going to give us all of the story. And there's going to be times where the media just flat out and lie. It's not illegal to lie in the news, just so everybody knows. And so, when I look at this, I'm like, what's the relationship between Mali's military and France's military? Because we know, like, they have joint operations. I know you recently did a video talking about France's withdrawal from the region that's happening. Like, they're going to end their occupation. Well, let me not say that they're going to end it, but France is withdrawing. They had the operation with Barkhane. That they're going to end in February of next year, I think. Yeah,
not just in Mali, also in just the entire Sahel region, so Central African Republic. A lot of the countries, they're starting to withdraw troops, and there's a various reasons for that. But yes, then the relationship, of course, is that militaries, I think, in Africa in general, are very much linked to colonial masters, and that's how they basically keep us crippled. Because obviously, if you're being funded by France, if you're being funded by England, if you're being funded by America, you're not going to do anything that could be detrimental to their interests.
Yeah, and that goes to the point of I'm pretty sure, like, this is a person who's in a position, talking about the president of Mali, in a position of power. Just like other African leaders, at least relative to other Africans within the area, that do not want to sever their ties with the former colonial. And when you talked about revolutionary program would be like, hey, we're doing it on these terms. But going back to even the withdrawal, France is, looking deeper into that. They're not actually like withdrawing. Like there's a task force that France is going to be leading up, and they're still going to have troops on the ground. The Takuba task force and the European military. It's the European military task force led by France that's going to be working with the Mali military. So, they're still going to be involved, just in a different capacity. But Frank, you wanted to add something?
Yeah. I just want to add, like the question Tiani asked, whether France is involved in it. or not, even the investigation is still going on. But I just want to add this to, the question she asked. The truth of the matter here is whenever there's an assassination attempt or there's an assassination or there's a coup on the African continent, and it is not led by the masses, it is not led by the revolutionary masses of the people. Obviously, you know that there's a foreign influence, or there is an external factors in it that led to these how they call it, assassination attempt or assassination or coup d'etat, as long it is not revolutionary or it is not from the masses of the people. We all know that if a president or any African president that is not for the people, that person will never be assassinated by outside or outside influence and things, and will not be assassinated an assassination attempt by one or two person. It will be the masses. If it is for the people, it will be the masses that will come out, that will protest, and that will march and things. But if you see 4 or 5 person, obviously you know that it is an outside hand that is being influenced by, how they call it, some people to go do such things and what have you. So we should also look into that aspect when we discussing some of these things as well. As long as it is not revolutionary, as long as it is not from the masses, there are also influence.
Yeah, definitely. I agree. Like I said, it's just like so much because so much turmoil in that region as a result of colonialism, and the masses are definitely like looking for a change. I think like one of the things, that's why we charge colonialism is so important, and all of these movements against colonialism, because we understand that it still exists today, and that the current order is the root of all of these critical issues that African people are dealing with every day. Whether it's drug addiction, poverty, and so forth. And that's why when we go across the African continent, we just talked about 2 countries today. Both of these countries are experiencing extreme poverty on a large scale. And these is former colonies where the colonist still has a relationship with these countries. So there has to be some sort of connection between these colonists, former colonists, and the people that are in Africa. And
let me just, no, Tiani want to go in.
No, I think that was a good point. And I think we have to think logically. Is all this coincidence? So the same people who colonized Africa are all rich and still rich, and all the places that were colonies are still poor. They try to pretend like, this is just, development or whatever. But it goes a lot deeper than that, because there's no reason why all these years after colonialism, we're just sinking more and more backwards, as a people. And we can't measure, these things by things like, even people say development, they usually think about buildings and roads. Like, you have to measure it by the conditions of the people. All this so-called extremism is a result of poverty. People don't join extremist groups just for fun. It's kind of like, if you're in the US, if you're rich and privileged, are you going to join a gang? No, you're going to be enjoying your money. If everything's good with you, are you going to enjoy the gang? More likely than not, no, you're not going to join a gang. It's usually whenever you're poor and whenever you want some security, that's whenever things like that will happen. It's the same thing in Africa and the same thing overseas.
Yeah, and just to add to the French withdrawing their troops from Africa, we should also think outside of the box. They are not doing it because they want to do it. The issue here is they might be doing it because there is pressure on these people, because both on the continent and in the diaspora, Africans are rising up, and Africans are complaining, and Africans are demanding for the withdrawal of foreign military from the African continent. So bear in mind, they themselves, they are coming to a point that, I think we got to find other alternative. So as they are leaving, we can't sleep. Like Nkrumah said, you cannot sleep on the imperialists, because the imperialists never sleep when it comes to discussing you, or when it comes to doing anything against you. If they are withdrawing their troops, we should also look at another alternative that they might be taking. That is, they might train in a puppet, because we all know they still have these leaders in power as puppet to them. So as they are leaving, they are collaborating with these puppet leaders, to have their military train. So all their trainings, all their military trainings and stuff will be done in those colonial countries. And now, if they do that, when they come back, what do you think? You still having a colonial army within that country. So that army is not the army for the people or for the country. That army is an army trained by the colonial master in the home of the colonialist. So when they come, they are coming to work in the interest of the colonialist because they are being trained and educated on what to do.
Whew. Yeah. There was a couple of points, like Tyranny raised a great point. I just wanted to add to, like the material things that people are so obsessed with. We have to look at, like, it's coming at what expense? These new gadgets, new clothes and other material objects that we're so obsessed with. We have to think about, like, the amount of people that we're, like, stepping on, not us, but just generally speaking, stepping on for the sake of progress. And I think it's important that we look at that. We look around the world and look at the people who are suffering, just so we can live comfortably. And then Frank, you just made a point too. It's just like how the colonized goes to Europe, goes to these European institutions, get educated or get trained in the military, come back to their countries and carry on the programs of the oppressor. It's just like here in America, how we have people leave our communities and go to Harvard or Princeton, go to these colonial. They don't even have to go to those Ivy League institutions, right? And be educated in the colonizers' institutions and come back to the community. Sometimes they don't even come back and carry out the oppressor's program. So it's important that we look at that. But yeah, we can move on to Tanzania in the news, and I'm going to talk about the opposition to the Constitution, the current Constitution that exists there. There's a call from the people. I know that's general, but there's a call from the people that wants to change in the Constitution that has been the Constitution of Tanzania since 1977. It's actually the fourth constitution since Tanzania gained its independence. When they acquired their independence in 1960, they were a former British colony, but before that, they were a German colony. So you have another country in Africa who experienced decades of colonialism and came out of that in 1960. But this call for a change in the Constitution has a lot to do with the power that's granted to the executive branch, to the president under the current Constitution. When the Constitution was adopted, there was a one-party system. And I think it was in the 1990s, no, it might have been the early 2000s. Tanzania went to a multi-party system. And so currently, like, the president, though, under the current Constitution, is able to appoint appoint the administrators of the Tanzania government. So all of the people in positions of power, the president has the power to appoint those people. And there's sort of no checks and balances under the current system. So there's a call for a more parliamentary sort of style of system. We always look through the way that the Europeans, do it, or America does it. And, because as I'm reading and studying, seeing what people are calling for, they want to be able to impeach or, just sort of have this checks and balances on the president. So that's what's being called for now. But I think, like, once again, we're caught up in this system, going back to the education or miseducation. We're caught up in this system that's all pervasive, and the only answers that we see is answers of, like, reforming the system. Like, there's no call for revolutionizing the system. I think the only way that we can, like, really gain this right, self-determination on the continent of Africa and around the world, that we have to go beyond just reform and wanting to decentralize power within a system where we don't even exercise power on a large scale.
Yeah, let me say, I do not believe Western democracy. First of all, I don't believe it works for Western societies, and it certainly doesn't work for African societies. It always, pisses me off when we allow people to tell us, "Oh, you should have this type of government." But I feel like by now we should have a good sense that we've tested this type of government, and it doesn't do anything for African people. It doesn't hold people accountable. It doesn't make the politicians less corruptible. It doesn't ensure that the people are doing better economically. If anything, we should understand that that form of government really has a lot to do with why the West is still able to control our people, because of how they manufactured the democracy to basically be one that benefits the rich and the wealthy. So this idea that, oh, we're going to challenge, who said that a single party democracy is not democratic? They told you that, but who are they to tell you that? They're the people who are trying to control you. Not just that, but a lot of people like President Magafuli. A lot of what he was able to do was because of the government structure that was as it was. So I truly believe that there are outsiders trying to influence this. Stop it. I know America, for example, has been trying to get more and more inside of Tanzania. And it seemed as though, particularly with Magafuli being out of power, that the current landscape, they might be trying to seize that opportunity, because I know America and Kenya, which is one of Tanzania's neighbors, have a very close relationship, and they're trying to not just have a close relationship with Kenya, but they're trying to economically secure a trade deal with multiple countries in that region. So I'm very sure that this didn't just come out of nowhere, that African people didn't say, oh, we need a parliamentary system. I'm very sure that some outside, meetings have been happening between U.S. or whoever. I'm pretty sure it's U.S. though, to try to ensure that they'll be able to secure more control inside of that country.
Yeah, I think something that we can look at as sort of a pattern too throughout the African states, is that there is a level of state control over the economy. And so, which doesn't always work in the interest of the people, because the state has this control, but there's so much corruption that any benefits that the economy sees mostly goes to those people who are in positions of power rather than to the people, to the masses of people. And so, but the struggle is against those capitalist forces who want to open these economies up more. This has always been the struggle. When we go back to even like the structural adjustment programs that was created by these global banking systems, the IMF, World Bank, who sort of just like forces African countries or developing countries or underdeveloped countries to stop their state spending, which still happens today. But Frank, look like you want to say something.
Yeah, let me just add something up quick. I
can tell when you're ready to go in, Frank.
Yeah, I think one thing we as African fail to realize is that they fail to realize that the Western system is even more corrupt than the system in Africa. And for each time we African want to take on the Western system, in our faith, we tend to be corrupt. And the reason why we tend to be corrupt is because the system we're going after is corrupt. And it is through that corruption that they manage to put Africa in a situation it is today. And that is why for each time we go to take the Western system, we corrupt our own people. The continent is already in dying need. And then we go on to take us our system, and our system is a system corrupting us. And then we in turn corrupt our own people. And the issue here is, until African people can realize that America does not practice democracy, Europe does not practice democracy, we will not move forward. And we can only move forward as well until we find a system that works best for us, and not a system that is not even working for the people, and then we take that system and want to use it for. I tell you this, in 2016, when I was at Penn State doing my master program, this professor asked a question, and he said, and I was the only black person in a classroom, and he said, "Do you believe that America practice democracy?" And everybody in the classroom, they said yes, putting a hand, oh yes, America is a democracy. I was the only person that raised hand and said no. America is not a democratic institution. America is a country that has set of pieces of system put together. And they will all look at me like I was crazy. And the professor said, "I am not going to tell you what kind of system America practice, but Frank is right." That's how it stopped right there. And they were all sitting there like, what?
And you were. That's what's up. That's called thinking outside of the box right there. So, we're gonna move on. We get into these topics, man. Like, sometimes, it's hard to like really be brief when we're talking about these different events that's happening around the world. But we're gonna move on to the book reading portion of this show. But before we do that, I just want to encourage everybody to go to our website, wechargecolonialism.org. wechargecolonialism.org. There we have several articles on the web page, and more about the organization can be found on the web page as well. But these articles also goes deep into examining what's happening around the world, the African experience. Also, email us at info@wechargecolonialism.org, and someone will get back to you about being a part of this organization, how you can get involved and be a part of this process of decolonizing the world. We're African people and we're fighting for liberation. So we're going to get into our reading, Class Struggle in Africa by Kwame and Nkrumah. And we're starting from chapter 1, Origins of Class in Africa, which is on page 13. Everyone should have access to this. There should be a link in the chat. So, Origins of Class in Africa. Africa and its islands, with a land area of 12 million square miles and a population estimated at about 500 million, could easily contain within it, and with room to spare, the whole of India, Europe, Japan, the British Isles, Scandinavia, and New Zealand. The United States of America could easily be fitted into the Sahara Desert. Africa is geographically compact, and in terms of natural resources, potentially the richest continent in the world. In Africa, where economic development is uneven, a wide variety of high sophisticated political systems were in existence over many centuries before the colonial period began. It is here in the so-called developing world of Africa and in Asia and Latin America where the class struggle and the progress toward ending the exploitation of man by man have already entered into the stage of decisive revolutionary change. The political maturity of the African masses may to some extent be traced to economic and social patterns of traditional times. Under communalism, for example, all land and means of production belonged to the community. There was a people's ownership. Labor was the need and habit of all. When a certain piece of land was allocated to an individual for his personal use, he was not free to do as he liked with it, since it still belonged to the community. Chiefs were strictly controlled by councilors and were removable. There have been 5 major types of production relationships known to man: communalism, slavery, feudalism, capitalism, and socialism. With the establishment of the socialist state, man has embarked on the road to communism. It was when private property relationships emerged as communalism gave way to slavery and feudalism that the class struggle began. In general, at the opening of the colonial period, the peoples of Africa were passing through the higher stage of communalism, characterized by the disintegration of tribal democracy and the emergence of feudal relationships, hereditary tribal chieftaincies, and monarchical systems. With the impact of imperialism and colonialism, Communalist social economic patterns began to collapse as a result of the introduction of export crops such as cocoa and coffee. The economies of the colonies became interconnected with the world capitalist markets. Capitalism, individualism, and tendencies to private ownership grew. Gradually, primitive communalism disintegrated and the collective spirit declined. There was an expansion of private farming and the method of small commodity production. It was relatively easy matter for white settlers to appropriate land which was not individually owned. For example, in Malawi by 1892, more than 16% of the land had been alienated and 3/4 of it was under the direction of 11 big companies. When the land was seized by settlers, the African owners began in some cases tenants or leaseholders, but only did I read that right? Only became, in some cases, tenants or leaseholders, but only on land considered not fertile enough for white farmers. The latter were usually issued with certificates of ownership of land by the British consul, acting on behalf of the British government, and any land not under any specific private ownership was declared British Crown land. Similar arrangements were made in other parts of colonial Africa. Under colonialism, communal ownership of land was finally abolished and ownership of land imposed by law. Furthermore, through the system of indirect rule, chiefs became tools and in many cases paid agents of the colonial administration. Yeah, so I want to stop there because there was, so much said. I appreciate what was just read too, because it speaks to this history, this history that has we're the result of this history that is being talked about in this passage right here. Just understanding that, at least my understanding when it comes to colonialism, like I feel like today, not even just a feeling, just my, observation that the current system is a colonial institution. The difference between traditional colonialism and the colonialism that we have today is that it's a lot more open for people to be able to become administrators of colonialism. So, it opened the door for Africans on the continent to become administrators of the colonial empire. And even within the United States, as African people are experiencing internal colonialism, the door has been open to an extent because we have racism still, but it's still open enough for Africans to be able, I don't know if y'all hear all that noise, but Africans to be able to be a part of the colonial institution.
Yeah, that's why I love Nkrumah. There's so much here because I always, if anyone happens to follow my channel, African Aspire TV, I'm very big on emphasizing that we have to not just be anti-colonialism, but we have to be anti-capitalism, and we have to look to socialism. And people always say, well, socialism doesn't work, but they forget that we were living in a socialist Africa prior to encountering Europeans. And, as he broke down, whenever you have a situation, the land is not owned by individuals. The land is owned communally. In addition, individuals can't come and just buy it up. I mean, think about who benefits under the capitalist system. It's the Europeans who benefit. That's why they want us to be have privatized property, because they want to have the ability to come in and buy it up, or they want to have a certain class of people have access to more. So it's very important for us to read things like this and to also examine prehistoric Africa. Also talking back to what we we're saying about democracy, that is to me much more representative than what we have, what he described as far as the chiefs. They were being controlled by a council and the chiefs were removable. That was something African and representative. So we have to go back and figure out what actually did work for us versus what doesn't work for us.
Yeah, you wanted to make a point, Frank?
No, I just want to add, what she said it perfectly. I think what Nkrumah is saying here as well, he's reminding us to go back into history and see how we lived before European came on the continent, before they came and told us, what we practiced, was wrong and there was right. So basically, he's just telling us, doing how they call it, before the European came to Africa, our socialist system, land were owned by the masses, by everybody. farming system was owned by everybody. We all work collectively. We all, work communally, and we all did everything together. So with that system and looking at this system, the capitalist system, where the land is controlled by the few, resources and are controlled by the few, you look in between there, which one works best and which one doesn't work best. So he's just telling us, to actually look into this. Like South Africa, you got 9% of the population own 90% of the land and resources. You got Zambia, the same thing. Other places in Africa, and African people are not major contributors, are not part of, what they're supposed to enjoy, what they're supposed to have as their inheritance. They're not benefiting from it. So Nkrumah is just telling us, do we support a system like this, or should we go back and look at a system that we all benefited from, we all own, that nobody owned, nobody dominated?
Yeah, and I think this is what more people have to be educated on, because of course, like the colonial education is only to uphold the current system. And when we look at the system of capitalism, like for me, like capitalism is colonialism without war, And actually, like capitalism is still, it's war to a certain extent. But if you think about colonialism, to colonize a group of people, you're going to have to go into that community and murder, cause genocide, murder, and enslave a group of people. Through capitalism, you're able to say, hey, we can offer you jobs, so it's colonialism with more of a benign face at the end of the day. So we in order for us to to end this relationship that we have with these colonizers, we have to end capitalism, we have to end colonialism. But I'm gonna move on to the next paragraph. With the seizure of the land with all of its natural resources, that is, the means of production, two sectors of the economy emerged, the European and the African, the former exploiting the latter. Subsistence agriculture was gradually destroyed, and Africans were compelled to sell their labor power to the colonialists who turned their profits into capital. It was in these circumstances that the race class structure also emerged as part of the class struggle. I just read a paragraph, but I want to stop it there because I think this is important too for us to examine, because when we talk about the emergence of African people or Pan-Africanism or the struggle for African people to be free being an international struggle, it goes back to what's being spoken about in this passage right here. He said the European and African, he said when the seizure of the land with all of its natural resources, that is the means of production, two sectors of the economy emerged, the European and the African, the former exploiting the latter. So, we don't try to like romanticize this history and say like, 1,000 years ago, all African people were homogenous. Like, no, African people are not homogenous. And they're not so today, but we have to emerge as a single political unit, because under colonialism, under European colonialism, they created a global system that impacts African people on the continent and the diaspora. So this exploitation is taking place as us being one people. And so in order for us to be free, we have to unite as one people. So I can go.
You muted.
Okay. With the growth of commodity production, mainly for export, single crop economies developed completely dependent on foreign capital. The colony became a sphere for investment and exploitation. Capitalism developed with colonialism. At the same time, the spread of private enterprise, together with the needs of the colonial administrative apparatus, resulted in the emergence of first a petty bourgeois class and then an urban bourgeois class of bureaucrats, reactionary intellectuals, traders, and others who became increasingly part and parcel of the colonial economic and social structure. It's another important point. You know, people like to talk about, well, Africans practice, capitalism, get back in the day. Like, no, when we talk about capitalism today, as is defined, those systems that existed before, whatever markets that they had, is no comparison to the capitalism that grew with colonialism, grew out of colonialism. So, we have to be able to make that connection. This is what we're dealing with, this system that has been developed over the last 600 years.
Yeah, that's a good point, because I get those comments too. I think some people confuse capitalism with like, oh, this idea of free markets or buying and trading. That's not what capitalism is. You have to understand what the actual definition is. The definition is having a few people own the means of production, meaning own the factories, the land, instead of having the masses. So all of that, propaganda where America says, oh, it's about free markets and trade and all that stuff. That's not the definition of capitalism. And yes, trade and businesses always existed and do exist under many socialist constructs. But I think it's an important point you made.
Yeah, and to add to that too, to even add deeper flavor to it, during that time period as well, right? There was something called battle system as well. So if I have certain product and you want it, and you have certain product that I want that I don't have, we do exchangement. So you give me that product, I give you the product that I have. So that was part of the trade that was going on as well. So if we, like you said, we have to clearly explain it to our people. So it was a form of battle system. So I gave you what I want, what you want, and you give me what I want. So that was a kind of trade as well that was going on. So if you have cocoa and I have coffee, I need a cocoa, you give me the cocoa and I give you the coffee, and we move on.
Yeah, like Kwame Nkrumah, he's coming with bars, so it's hard for me to get through all this. So to facilitate exploitation, colonialism hampers social and cultural progress in the colonies. Obsolete forms of social relations were restored and preserved. Capitalist methods of production and capitalist social relationships were introduced. Friction between tribes was in some cases deliberately encouraged when it served to strengthen the hands of colonial administrators. But certain economic developments, such as that of the extractive industry, plantations, and capitalist farming, the building of ports, roads, and railways were undertaken in the interests of capitalism. As a result, social changes occurred. Feudal and semi-feudal relationships were undermined with the emergence of an industrial and agricultural proletariat. At the same time, there developed a national bourgeoisie and an intelligentsia. In this colonialist situation, African workers regarded the colonialists, foreign firms, and foreign planters as the exploiters. Thus, their class struggle became, in the first instance, anti-imperialist and not directed against the indigenous bourgeoisie. It is this which has been responsible in some degree for the relatively slow awakening of African worker and peasant to the existence of their true class enemy, the indigenous bourgeoisie. It's another great, I think point that's being made. Hindsight, I think, like here he's saying like hindsight is 2020. And it's interesting because when Kwame Nkrumah is talking about these things, they're just African countries are just gaining their independence. So he has this insight of neocolonialism in its earliest stages. But he's talking about this attack on not just fighting the colonists, who are the Europeans and white people. He's talking about African people who are also working in the interest of the colonists. And so we get caught up in the skin color. We think that only white people are the ones that's exploiting us, but are the only ones that are the colonists. But it's African people that are working in their interest, and we have to call them out. We're waging the struggle against them as well.
I seen a comment by Baruti I wanted to address. It's inside of the in the chat. I'm gonna put it on the screen. But Ubuntu's African sociocentric ethics creates a base and resource for culture, 7 layers, including economic. Use Ubuntu to express an African economic worldview. Capitalism and socialism are Luzungu concepts. I hope I said them right. Yeah, all right. So I think this is something I experience also with a lot of our people. A lot of us don't like the word socialism because we think it's a European experiment, a European invention. And I think we have to back up away from that and just think more practically. So when we say socialism, we're saying an industrial system where the masses own the means of production. That's the definition. Capitalism, only a few. So we have 2 choices. Are the masses going to own it or the few? Now, you don't have to use the word socialism if you don't. If you want to call it Ubuntu and that's what you're more comfortable with, fine. But the basic definition, are the masses owning the means of production or only a few people? I think that's what we have to be more stuck on. Another thing, though, is that if you take a concept of Ubuntu and apply it to an industrialized society, because prior to this, in a communal society, it was more, it was agricultural, If you're applying that concept to an industrial society, I'd be very curious to know concrete examples where it doesn't look the same as what we would consider socialist. And so I think, I also wonder why some of us, why inside of our spaces where we talk about things like this, why are we comfortable with adopting Black nationalism, even though nationalism is, if you're using the same example, you could say nationalism is a European ideal that came out of Europe. Nationalism, I think, is something that translates to all African people. You want ownership of what you control, but they came up with the word nationalism. We have to have the same type of look at socialism. If you don't want to look at it you shouldn't look at it as a European construct. It's something that we've practiced historically, but if you take what we did in the past and apply it to the current, you're going to, I think, get the same exact results. And if you don't want to call it socialism, you want to call it an African name, that's fine. But let's just remember the basics. Who's going to own the means of production? A few people or the masses?
Yeah, that's a great point because the system that we do develop, we have to think outside of the box when it comes to creating this system. We know that capitalism doesn't work. Colonial capitalism doesn't work. We want to develop something new. What does that system look like? Ubuntu, the idea of Ubuntu, I push that all the time. And I think under Ubuntu, it creates certain value system when the value that is placed on humanity is something that doesn't exist under colonial capitalism. But you can see how people are valued under the philosophy of Ubuntu. There's this value and connection to the land, and then going back to the control of the means of production in Ubuntu, the philosophy of I am because we are, and even the story, whether fictional or not, but the story of the young African boy who did not want to run into the tree and grab all of the candy for himself if he was, to beat all of the other boys that he was competing with or people he was competing with. He'd rather grab their hands and all run to the tree together so that they all can reap the benefits of receiving that candy. So that's socialism at its core. So we can call it Ubuntu socialism, but it's about the African masses of people. Just to pick veggie back on what Tyranny said. But we had 2 minutes. I don't know, Frank, if you wanted to add something or if we had any announcements before we close out.
No, not really. I think we summarized that question. It was Tiani and you. I came back already. Cover it up. So, but I don't know if Tiani, we have any event coming out from the repatriation program.
I don't think you scheduled anything yet. So if we
not yet.
We'll announce it next week. Yeah.
Yeah. And I came in late to the one on Wednesday. Well, Frank, you was laying it down.
Listen, if anyone's missing this, Frank was on fire. We're gonna try to find a way to record it next time, but we did it on Clubhouse. And Clubhouse doesn't record, but the whole issue was, the role of China in Africa. And Frank, yes, was on fire the whole time. So next time, definitely, I would say try to catch it with us.
Definitely, it was some great political education, some information. So yeah, keep up with us so you can tune into the next one. And we'll be back here next Saturday at 10 a.m. We want to continue this read of the class struggle in Africa. This is really good. I want us to go deeper into that. So, I want to appreciate everybody for being a part of this conversation. For those who may have tuned in late, make sure that you visit our website, wechargecolonialism.org. Also send us an email, info@wechargecolonialism, to find out how you can be a part of this process of decolonizing the world. So until next time, peace.